We all hold questions until the end of Dan's presentation. During the presentation, you may type in any questions you have into the chat box, which is located at the bottom of your screen. I'm sure Jim will ask questions in the middle if he feels that it's important to ask during the presentation, but we generally will wait till the end. We can answer questions in the chat at the end, and you'll also have the opportunity to unmute to ask a question at the end. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Dan Martens, Novamont's Vice President of North America. Dan, if you'd like to share your screen while I introduce you, give you a minute or two to do that. Dan is here today to discuss keys to successful food waste composting and diversion, and on developing systematic changes for organics. Novamont is a world leader in the sector of bioplastics and biochemicals obtained through the integration of chemistry, environment, and agriculture. Novamont has a triple vocation: industrial reality, R&D center, and training center. Novamont promotes a bioeconomy model as a driving force for enhanced territorial regeneration. Novamont is based in Italy and has its North America headquarters in Shelton, Connecticut since 2010. And Dan is a Fairfield resident. So nice and local, Dan. Now, without further ado, Dan, take it away.
Okay, thank you very much. And say thank you to Pam, to Jim, to the whole group for giving me this time to share. I've been a Connecticut resident for about 35 years. We've had Novamont North America has had a presence in North America long for 15 or 20 years, but we had our office open for all of North America, I think with some pride in Connecticut. And then we relocated to Shelton. So I'm going to share a few things just to introduce the company a little bit, and then I'm going to make some recommendations on how we can get to some of these food scraps out of the system. I hope they're not bold recommendations, but we'll see. Maybe it's good if they are bold. We'll see. So let me. There we go. I start with a quote. This came out of an article in New York City. I also worked Manhattan Swab, and I'm an ad hoc member of the Queensboro Swab group. But this was about COVID and environmental issues, and about the intersectional environmentalism, which combines social injustice, environmental injustice, and where do we sit now with all these things, which I think have been kind of really highlighted for this year. So I'm just going to read it. In the cacophony of life and death issues, I debated the essentiality of composting. But recycling our food scraps is more than waste management. It's recognizing that sometimes the best solutions may not be glitzy technology, but the humility to harness the intelligence of nature, which I think sets us off in a tone that is maybe a little more higher noble than just, what are we going to do with our waste? So Novamont, as was the introduction, we are a biopolymer manufacturer, researcher. We really have a strong environmental mission. We don't just make products, but we try to make solutions. We also, just as our company, we have 600 people, we $270 million euros in turnover. We have research centers, production sites. Interesting to differentiate us from other folks is 20% of all of our employees are still in the research sector, and 5% of all of our turnover investments go into the research sector. Besides that, we know it's important to give back. So we also have a very strong training program for PhDs and for scientists. We do this world over, come to our headquarters, some of our plants to learn. And we've been awarded as one of the top Italian companies, top 100 for corporate excellence for several years in a row now. I want to just talk a little bit about our leadership. A little bit of history on the left. We made our first biopolymers. Our first is called Matter B 30 years ago. We had an anniversary in April, soon after the first compostable bag was made. So that's 30 years in the making too. We make the pellets that are on the side. So we really don't make the bags, we don't make forks, we don't make the products, but we make the biopolymers. However, we follow in step with our leader. Our leadership is our CEO, Katia Bastioli, and she's an international figure. She started down at the bottom. You can see when she was a young woman, a biochemist working in the Montedison group. She had her first patent soon after, about 30 years old, for destructuring starch. And from then, She went through the ranks in biochemistry, which is a kind of not an atypical path, especially today when we talk about, role models for young women in sciences and things, but since then, besides our CEO, she's also the president of Terna, which is the energy grid for Italy. She has 159 patents in 80 families. She is the past president of the Kyoto Club, which is an international environmental agency. 2007, she was given the Inventor of the Year for her body of work in biopolymers. In 2017, Bioplastics Person of the Year. She is also on the board for Soil Health, International Soil Health. So anyway, I think she's worth mentioning. I think it's a nice feather in Connecticut's environmental cap to know that you have a company here whose arm reaches to Italy and has someone like Katya, at the helm. So I hope you think that's neat. I do. Some of our plants on the left are some of our production sites, some of our research centers. We have the following missions: to reduce our dependency on fossil fuel sources, to battle against sea pollution. Most people know that the plastics that end up in the sea is environmental pollutants. However, in the soils, there's 6 to 20 times more plastics pollution. The problem is you can't see them, of course. Many of them are in a microplastics form, but they end up in the seas. We also have a battle against desertification of our soils. So we support composting, food scrap diversion, because this is so important to basically keep our soils healthy. And then, of course, we do scientific research. In 2019, we had an international, from Rome, we actually had a press conference where we revealed our 3-year study through the Hydra Foundation, Christian Lott, showing the degradability of our materials in the marine environment, which were positive. So they actually break down in the marine environment when they are in the presence of microbes. One pillar that I think is interesting is we basically have one of our, is basically taking old industrial sites to brownfield development. So instead of building new plants, we try to go into areas where the plants are shuttered or the jobs are lost, and we try to basically rebuild them. And this is one example where we're making 1,4-butanediol from sugars, which has never been done or isn't done anywhere else in the world. And we took an old production plant that was shuttered, and we basically kept the outside and kept the grounds and rebuilt the whole inside. So I think about all the old buildings around here. I was talking to Jim a little bit, and I said, wow, this might be a nice place to put a plant in Vermont, since some of our favorite things are up there. And it got me thinking maybe we'll have a Ben & Jerry's PBAT pumpkin flavor or something like that. So interesting. But this is one of our pillars. Our other pillars, of course, besides the reindustrialization of old sites, basically reuse, repurpose, is to use low impact products. So we make one of our chemicals from the thistle seed in Sardinia, which is basically a weed. It doesn't need fertilization, doesn't need water, and we can replace one of the chemicals in our recipes with the acylic acid. We make bio-BDO from sugars, and then of course is to not just make products that replace something, not just say, hey, here's a greener version of that. We want to make products that actually have a purpose besides replacing something, have a purpose to solve environmental problems. I just throw this up because I love seeing the big map. When I was in Frankfurt, Germany for one of the big international trade shows, they had the map up, and it was just so nice to see amongst all these international companies that little blue dot in Shelton, Connecticut. So that's where we are, and that's for all of North America. This actually is a pretty big deal. This year, we actually got our B Corp certification. So B Corp certification actually means that you are sustainable, responsible, work in transparency, not only on environmental issues, but on profitability that you're putting back into the community. It's a multi-year process to be certified. We're in good company. Since we're just in the small group here, I'll share some inside information, but one of the top scorers in the B Corporation certifier was a company called Patagonia, who got a score of 105. And Novamont came in at 104. So we're in top ranking with some of the better known environmental codes, but that's just between us. Don't share that because reuse their name. Products we made is called Matter B. Matter B is our brand made. Novamont only makes renewable, compostable materials. We don't make plastics. We don't do other things. We push to have a renewable content for, use more plant-based chemistry, more plant-based feedstocks, but always compostable. Oops. For some reason, I'm having trouble with my. There we go. Of course, with compostable, you must have certifications. So, of course, we have all the certifications, international certifications. Oh my goodness, why am I having trouble? There we go. Of course, for industrial composting, we tie to the international standards, which is the TÜV industrial composting, and in this country, BPI. For soil, we are certified to the EN standard, which is TÜV soil, EN 1733, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And then for home composting, we have home composting. Now we have about 25 different products in our portfolio. And of course, all of them have the basic certifications, and then other ones have more certifications. We also have products that are certified GMO-free for feedstocks, home compostable, those with high renewable contents, and some with not. So we try to have things for to meet every environmental requirement. But I want to talk about one. Digress just for a second to talk about this, and I'll tell you why. My second largest category, although smaller, is mulch film. And you may or may not be familiar with this, but these are the plastic films that go down on the ground that people plant through. They're a problem because they cannot be recycled. They have to be disposed of, and with more environmental issues and harder to dispose of plastics, it's a real problem. So for about 20 years, we've had compostable biodegradable mulch films. In 2018, the standard, the EU standard 1733, which was adapted by all of European nations for the first soil standard for biodegradability in soil. So here's some of the information with this. What's new is in September, just this year, California actually recognized the biodegradability in soil for mulch films. So that was just passed into legislation, which was really kind of a big deal. We could talk a little bit about that later. But the reason I threw this in here is because you look at Sharish Gilmore. I was on an advisory board member to USDA project, a 5-year study for with Washington State, University of Tennessee, and Montana State. And Sharish was at Washington State then, and we worked together on this project in the last couple of years. But now he's moved to UConn. So he's actually an expert on biodegradable, compostable mulch films as used in agriculture, and he's a hometown boy now. So if you want to know if there's an expert in town who can tell you all about biodegradability in soils, Sharish is the guy. So I throw that out as for him. However, for us, of course, it's important that all products that we have here are BPI certified. BPI certification basically certifies to the ASTM standards of D6400 and D6868, which one talks about the products itself and one talks about coatings, primarily on papers. But of course, these are the standard international standards, which are the EN standards, which are based on ISO standards. So this isn't something we just made up. They're actually based on international standards. However, I'm throwing this out here to show you because what's new is the added certification on PFAS. PFAS is something that's been highly talked about, highly debated. I was just on a call Monday night with Bioplastics Division in Australia because they're going through the same thing, basically wanting to know what we're doing here. You know, a BPI board member. I remember when this conversation started. It started in Europe, and then Europe kind of dropped it, and then it went to San Francisco that picked it up. And at that time, us as a BPI board said we need to make a stance on this. Now, just so you know, that PFAS did not exist in biodegradable plastics. Our material, it's not there. It's not added as a recipe. So any of your bioplastics or your biopolymers or compostable plastics, it isn't even an issue. Where it does affect is paper products. And BPI made a stance long before the infamous Chipotle article came out with the smoking gun about bagasse bowls. That was already in the BPI certification process that PFAS were not allowed, and intentional adding of PFAS are not allowed. So even in Australia now, they're digging even deeper to say, what if they're unintentional? What if they're in there? And there's about 5,000 different versions of that. So they're trying to figure out how they can trace that. But you can be certain with your compostable stuff, if someone says PFAS, if it's BPI certified, it's should be okay. How does this work? I'm giving you just a quick, I think this is a fun graphic though, but this is how biodegradation works. In the local environment, whether it be soil, composting, or marine, there's microbes. Just like everything, they eat leaves, they eat onion skins, they eat this, they'll eat us eventually. But basically what happens is the microbes can't eat a solid polymer, even a biopolymer. So what they do is they don't have teeth, obviously, although you might not know that. So they send out enzymes, which we represent as the little Pac-Man. And they basically can break the chains in these simple polymers. And when they do, they break them into monomers, which are smaller versions that they then can be ingested into the microbe. So that's basically how it happens. That's how they break down the material, whether it be a leaf, a compostable item, or something else. But then what happens? Well, let's assume that this fellow is, whoops, I don't know what's happening here. Oh, there we go. Let's assume that this fellow is a microbe, and the donut is the biopolymer. They ingest it with oxygen. They are able to convert it into energy. They excrete CO2, liquids, and solids, and then store it in biomass, which you can see from around the waistline. Yes, there's a lot of storage there. And then, of course, the whole thing, the whole microbe then becomes part of our soils and our compost. That's real quick, but it's kind of fun. Okay, so a little bit now, let's moving on to our experiences with collections. Matter B, like I said, about 30 years ago, they started making the first compostable bag was invented. Matter B was invented. And basically through North America, we can trace the ancestry of about 75% of all North American food scrap collection programs from two partners, which is Novamont and BioBag. BioBag was the Norwegian company that teamed up with Novamont way back when, and they went to market together. A lot of the programs that were launched for food scraps with compostable were through these two. And I know because a lot of I was there, so I can trace them back there. But where we started was in 1992 in Denmark was the first program where they used bags and bins. And then Italy, and then in the 90s was in northern Italy, Norway, and the end of the 90s was San Francisco and Seattle. The folks from San Francisco actually traveled to meet with Novamont folks in Milan to learn how they were doing it and brought it home. Seattle followed, along with Catalonia and Australia. Then in the 2000s, UK, Belgium, and Switzerland. And in Canada, the first food scrap curbside program that they had with bags and bins was in Hamilton, in Ontario. And I know because my boss actually was there with our customer up there, met with the local municipalities, and it was a very homespun event, but it was the first one. So we have pretty good experience in this. And then as short ago as like 2015, New York City officials came to, we actually had meetings with them in San Francisco people, and they came to Italy to see how it's done, or at least to see how they do it. So why do people go to Italy? Why is that a big deal? Well, Italy, especially Milan, has become the world showcase for how to collect food scraps and how to compost and how to do anaerobic digestion. In Milan itself, they get about 100 kilograms per person, per inhabitant, food scraps. They're able to keep it 48, less than 5% impurities. They have 261 composting plants, 47 anaerobic digester plants. You can see on the map, they far exceed other European cities. So with that also, they created the Milan Food Pack, which is basically talks about food waste and talks about food diversion and basically the circularity of food, whether you're growing it, whether you're eating it, the culinary arts, or composting it and then returning it to soil. It's all the same conversation, and we break it up into this is composting and this is that, but really it's all about food and our dependence on food and all the cycles. So the Milan Food Pack has been adopted by cities like New York City, Baltimore, I think Dallas, San Francisco. So Novamont hosts through the ESTA Foundation groups to come to Italy to tour. So here's just a quick of some of the tours that I've been on in the past several years. I thought we'd share this, and especially with a little bit of a Connecticut flavor. I've been there with the SCRI group, which was the University of Tennessee and Washington State. When they were studying mulch films, we went to Spain and to Italy to study the fields. We've had Californians Against Waste from California and also some legislators. Earth Matter, which is the DSNY composting site. We've actually had officials from DSNY come out. NRDC, we sponsored with NRDC 6 cities from across the country. 5 of them came to basically study food waste, and that's their Food Matters study tour, which was very interesting because even across the country, we're talking about Connecticut food waste diversion, but even the cities all have there are different stages where we're all trying to get to the same place. And then for a local flair, if you look on the left, you'll see Wayne Pesci from the Connecticut Grocers Association, and there's Julie Camerata, who you know. We've had Brian Paganini from Quantum Power come and tour some of the AD facilities. Senator Heather Summers, who at that time was on the Environmental Committee, and the retiring Joe Oshowitz, who was the Speaker of the House, they all came to see. So what, and there's Carla Casanero from Pittsburgh. She's a very, I'd say, renowned composter. She manages all of Pittsburgh Pirates, compost the whole stadium, basically composts it all. So I had to shout out to her because she's just, she's a special person. So let's take a quick look, a couple short videos of what you missed, and maybe when we get out of the time of COVID, we can do this again. So that was CESA. It's an anaerobic digester. They actually managed about 600,000 tons of organic waste in a year. But the reason it's not that, they take 250,000 tons of food scraps, which is half of our Connecticut load in one place. And they're only the 2nd largest anaerobic digester in Italy. However, the reason I put it in there is because when you talk about environmental circularity and how we're supposed to care for folks, when you saw the gardens in there, the reason I put that in there was because they actually have greenhouses, and they use some of the heat from the plant to warm the greenhouses. The greenhouses are there and the plants are there because they're also tied into a local facility who helps individuals recovering from addictions. So they're allowed to, they work in there while they're doing the recovery. They can do jobs, they can tend for the plants, and when they sell the plants, they actually can use the money for their programs. So rejuvenating soils and also rejuvenating lives. I thought that was just a really nice story. So let's take a look at, if you have never seen a transfer station where all the food scraps of 500,000 people, or like Connecticut looks like, you can take a look at this one. So of course, it's a little different there. We'll talk about the evolution of the bags, but there, basically, everything is collected in a compostable bag. At the CESA plant, 90% of all of the material that comes in is in a bag, basically because it's an urban program. And there they have shopping bags. They banned plastic bags, and they're only allowed compostable bags, or reusable bags, of course, or no bags, but people use the shoppers to collect their food sacks. So if you were talking to the general manager of AMSA, which is the public-private partnership in Milan who collects all the food scraps and does the hauling, this is what you would hear. Whoops, not that one.
To use plastic bags. So a lot of households use the same shopper coming from the market for the biowaste collection. And the quality is very, very high. So this is the food scrubber coming from the kitchens. So you can see every.
Just a little bit of contamination.
Okay.
That's good. It's good. What's the contamination rate on this? What contamination is?
Only in some cases plastic bags were very rare.
But inside very little.
Or for example this.
Yeah.
Because in the household you prepare the food, and so but it's the quality is very high. Not conform organic is only 5%.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think it's also interesting to note that in all those apartment buildings, if you do have more contamination, your bin will not be collected, you'll be tagged and you get a fine. And on your apartment building, all the bins are labeled by floor. So the fine is not just for one person, it actually gets shared by the whole floor. So everybody participates in paying the fine. So I just wonder how that might go over for some of our Connecticut folks. So let's leave Italy now and go to a little closer to home. So what I said is we have 519,000 tons. And so in the spirit of our election year, I said, let's see how we can get the road to 500,000. How can we eliminate some of these tons? But as I was doing my master composter seminars all throughout the state, we were talking about home composting. Everyone kept saying, yes, but what about the bears? So let's keep that in the back of our mind as we sort of go through and see how this plays out. So let's look at the evolution of composting programs and where they fit and where they apply. Of course, you can see me on the left there. I'm a home composter, screening. I actually have probably another amount of compost to harvest this year before the winter. Home composting is great. It's low cost, it's high commitment, it's self-contained. It's really a gateway to learning more about composting. You don't have to deal with haulers. You can use many different kinds of collection options. However, it only really gets a small population, and when we're trying to get to 500,000 tons, it's a good effort, but it's not really going to get us there. The second evolution is community composting. Again, it's relatively low cost. There's actually a high commitment. People who bring their materials, they drop it off. They're really making an effort. It's a gateway to a larger scale municipal composting. It's also socially engaging. People who have a town composting site, a community composting site are very involved. It's social. You could use multiple collection options. It can be in a suburban area, like locally. That's Andrew Terrell, who was also a master composter, and then went down to Earth Matter to get his certificate from Earth Matter for composting, working here in Bridgeport with a composting site. But then again, if you really want to make an impact, you need to go to municipal composting. So of course, this costs more. This is not a small feat. Commitment varies. You can have, say, everybody in your town should do it, but some people will, some people won't. It really needs outreach, because when you're dealing with masses of people, this is the food and compostables chart from Seattle, but they're everywhere. You have to tell people not to contaminate. What should be. You also have to supply tools. You need the bins. You need the liners. For this, you do need commercial haulers. I meant, commercial haulers, you're getting to, this will be very small for them. So yeah, you have to work with them for different rates. To do it in the European model, you need the vented pails, you need compostable bags, but really you can get at the dense populations and you can get at the retail businesses. And that's where we can make a dent. So all of these are viable options. It's just really what is appropriate to the goals that you want to have. So here's my point. And this is where we actually participate, or this is where we have impact, is nothing will happen unless someone collects a bag of food scraps. As we saw in Milan, all that warehouse full of resources, food scrap resource, was one bag from one family. And you saw there was, tons of it, literally. But if we can't get people to participate, then we have nothing. Even if we have the best whiz-bang anaerobic dye site in the whole nation, doesn't matter. So let's look at we're going to focus on where we play, where Novamont has expertise. Besides collecting the dots for big, giant, municipal programs, you have to get them from the kitchen to the curb. So when I was about 10 or 12 years old, I would be at my aunt and uncles in West Virginia. And what they would do is they didn't have garbage disposals or any of that back then. It was very basic. We would use a coffee can, and it's cheap. There's no handle. You have to wash it out, great for home composting. It would be filled with eggshells and coffee grounds and anything that you didn't want to go down the drain. I would have to carry it out. It's a little slippery, a little smelly. I'd put it in a big chicken wire bin with leaves and some other stuff. I'd have to take a pitchfork and turn it over, and then we threw lime on it. And truly, I didn't know why we did it, but that's what we did. We don't do that now. However, you could evolve. If you want to do home composting, you could use basically a bucket, with a handle, but no top. They cost around $5. But then you can go anywhere with a nice solid bin with a locking top and a handle, which is good for community drop-offs. You can use it with a liner or without, but these could be for the basic models like $15, or you can get designer ones up to like $40. Or if you want to be real cheap, you can use as a liner a paper bag, although these will not hold up for wet and soupy stuff. You could put it in there and put it in your freezer and then take it to a drop-off, but it really does not suit it for a large-scale municipal program. The state-of-the-art out of Europe is to use this vented pail. It has a locking top and has a handle. However, you need to use a compostable bag liner. They go together. It can be used for community programs or for municipal programs. So, and this is really the state of the art. Now, you can look at the bin. It's got holes in it. It's got holes in the top. For what it does, it's relatively cheap. Some of the people I work with, actually, if you buy a roll of bags, they'll give you a free bin for your municipal program. But you can import these from Italy for probably, on a large scale for $2 or less a piece. Now, why do they have the holes in them, and why do they have the bag in them? Well, it goes together as the state-of-the-art practices, what it does. So I'm going to switch to a couple slides from a presentation from Catalonia in Spain, where they just did a big seasonal on all their organics. So this is all part of a bigger presentation. However, let's talk about why a compostable bag. What's the difference in the kitchen, besides the fact it breaks down and all that stuff. But the reason we use it in the kitchen with a vented pail is because it breathes. It has what's called a high water vapor transpiration rate. And so in Catalonia, they measured and found that there was 5% losses of weight for water evaporation. What does that mean? Why is that important? Well, you could say, well, it's great for haulers because there's less weight, there's less water. But what does it mean for people in the kitchen? Well, it means it doesn't smell. It doesn't smell because the smells come from the sour anaerobic digestion in a closed bin. I'm saying digestion, but it's really not that. It's what we call basically sour, and it keeps from the liquid building up in the bottom of the bin. So when you're transferring, you don't have the soup in the bottom, and basically makes it a much more pleasant way for people to collect food scraps. And then at the end, you can take the bag out and you can put the whole bag in your curbside bin. and you don't have the slop in the bottom, as you could see. You will have some moisture, possibly from basically the moisture coming out. So it's not leaking, it's just letting it breathe. Just like if you had, it will smell basically like if you had a bowl of lettuce on your counter for a week, but it makes it a very nice hygienic way to collect food scraps. And this has become the state of the art. So here's my bear question, bring it back to. Really, if you're going to get to 500, it's not about where the bears are, it's about where the people are. And if you're going to do that, it's a matter of density, because the more people, the more food scraps, more collections. And for that, you need an urban collection system. I always think it's funny how we think of composting as being out on the farm, and we're like I did with my aunts and uncle out in West Virginia, and I'm taking the thing and I'm turning the pile. But really, if you want to get 500,000, you have to go where the people are, because that's where the food scraps are. For that, the state of the art, you don't have to do this, but the state of the art is with a vented kitchen pail. It's actually cheaper, so you're actually saving on resources. Then you would need a tote for the curbside. It's much more hygienic to use. It doesn't leak liquid. It doesn't smell. And actually, there's some studies out of Europe. There was actually one in Alberta, Canada, that was mentioned on a call yesterday, that participation increases when you use a compostable bag. It decreases when you use a paper bag, and you get no participation when you have nothing. Because average citizens, not green martyrs like ourselves that do crazy things to be environmental, but average citizens want to do the right thing, but they won't if it's hard. But if you do it right, participation will increase. And I don't think that's really a foreign concept for those even who have had their experiences just in recycling, because it's the same people, the same thing. However, in our top 10 cities, we could probably get about 150,000 of those tons out if we were to have, great participation and all that. However, but it just shows you that you need that approach. So what's needed? We kind of need curbside programs. So I kind of looked at a little chart and said, well, what states have curbside programs? And we did a little chart here, California, Washington State, New York City. And then of course, Connecticut's down at the bottom, which is, we don't have any. So we only have room to grow, which is great. We can still do the other things, but I thought also it was interesting because it always comes up about the bags. What about the bags? What about this? And of course, we can do a whole webinar on bioplastics if you like, or compostables if you like. But this is basically about how to get the food scraps out of the kitchen. So we note that where they have the largest programs like California, Washington, they also have exemptions in their bag bans for compostable bags. And I've gotten calls on this. I actually was part of the conversation for California when they were putting their bag ban in, and they needed the exemption. And we did the same thing. I've been called in Washington State as well, working with Seattle. So they realized that tools are needed, and making them readily accessible to average folks. And they do that through shopping bags or through produce bags. So let's quickly look at legislation. I will move along here. Oh no, before that, let's compare. Let's look at how they collect food scraps in Milan and how they do in New York City. Okay, so let's take a look at New York City.
Hi, I'm Catherine Garcia, New York City Department of Sanitation Commissioner, and we're here today talking about organic recycling and composting, black gold. I'm with my mother, Ann McIver, and we're going to talk about how she composts. She's in our organics pilot program in Park Slope in Brooklyn. Mom, can you tell me how you participate in the program?
So I have a bin that I keep, this white, actually it's a canister, that I keep on my counter very conveniently. And I use these compostable bags that you can buy at almost all stores. And I put them directly into a bin, which I keep on the counter. Then when it gets pretty full, I put it like this, and I tie it up, and I take it and I put it out in my brown bin. Join us. Get with the program.
Visit nyc.gov/organics.
So it's interesting, in Milan, they have the vented pails and they have the grocery bags that are compostable. In New York, they have a solid bin and a organics collection bag, but they're still all collecting and they're all putting them out for curbside. So just a different way of doing it. So real quick on legislation, move forward. European legislation, they have bag bans. About 66% of all the countries have plastic bag bans. 10 of the European countries have exclusive for compostables only. So when people say like, oh, compostable bags, this is kind of a new wacky kind of thing. Well, it's something really has been around. So just looking at Italy in 2012 had the first national bag ban. They had an exemption for compostable bags because it supported their food scrap diversion. France followed as well for produce bags. Spain is just saying all lightweight bags must be compostable only. And Austria did the same this year, basically for home compostable. Some of them cite must be home compostable. Some of them cite must have renewable contents. That means that materials made from plant-based content, but it varies. But it's certainly moving that direction. Today in the EU, over 200 million people use compostable bags daily. Here in the States, Palo Alto became the first Bay Area city to ban plastic produce bags and then to say compostable only. San Francisco then followed, and that came in the summer. Both COVID has been a little bit delayed, but they have either paper or compostable for produce bags. Plastics is not allowed. But I was in on the conversation. Originally, it started with Brookline, Mass, because in 2016 they called me and wanted to know what was happening in France. And they decided as a town they had banned plastic bags and wanted to get rid of all plastics. So they made a mandate that produce bags had to be compostable. I actually went up and did a little meeting for some of the town staff and talked with my little vented pail and my bags. They passed it. And then, of course, the stores in the area, one of them was Trader Joe's. They said, well, we can't just do this for one store. So they basically made all the Trader Joe's stores in New England be compostable produce bags. And then the folks in the Northwest said, hey, we want that too. And basically they became the first chain to go coast to coast with a home compostable produce bag. Well, of course, people came up to me at shows and things and said, hey, do you know what this is? And I said, yeah, I know what it is. It started in Brookline, Mass. And it got to San Francisco with the environmental folks I knew. And about 7 years before that in San Francisco, I was actually asked if we could do this. So all this legislation kind of really came from Massachusetts right up the road. And of course, in Manchester, the municipalities actually, they didn't have a bag ban, but they legislated for home compostable tea sacks only because it supported their home composting and their municipal composting goals. I'm going to play one last video because during COVID, we were asked to supply some bags for Big Y. They didn't want to use plastic, and they decided they want to use compostable. So we're going to wrap it up real quick because I know it's going a little long and we want to have questions. So in my humble observations, what do I recommend? Well, of course, you want to support the home composting program. UConn's Master Composter, the best deal in town, and Dawn's Army will spread the word. I think we need to support micro haulers because their outreach is to homes. They'll actually go to homes and they'll put the brochures and get the people working and do a lot of that legwork for you. We need to streamline permits for composting, for community composters, make it easier and support park drop-offs. We need to get more composting sites. And I would say, look, ask them that in the permitting, they have to take food scraps. They have to be permitted for that. And they have to at least say they will take compostable bags. You got to be on the team if we're getting to the road to 500,000. Support advocacy groups. I'm a little tired of pilots. I say, look, we've been doing this for 20 years. Let's just put some things out there and get started. Smaller is better to start than a big pilot that never gets done. And also we need to build anaerobic digesters, but of course with the technology. This is something that we must do, I think, this year. And this is follow-up, but we need to have compostable labeling laws put in place because just copy Washington State, copy California. That's what Maryland did. Here's the two bills. The reason we have so much trouble with compostables is it's been muddied up by the plastics industry, things that aren't really compostable that they say are, mislabeling, things like that. So it'd be nice to sort of get our foundation done and then everybody will be on the same page. California, Washington State's done already and so is Maryland. I think Connecticut can be the 4th state in the country to ban the word biodegradable, my opinion. However, the people are out there. The road to activity is there. I've worked with composters, with municipalities, our home composting. We did our fruit label, compostable fruit label trials up in Danbury that was published. But also you can see I worked with a couple elementary schools to put in their food scrap diversion. You can see a little comic book there, which we did. But this year we've actually put we made an iPhone app out, which is free, no commercials, no ads, and you can download it onto iPhone, and it talks about basically how to separate food scraps. So here's a quick. So that's available for free download on the Apple Store. And I'm sorry I went a little long, but I appreciate the opportunity and hope we have time for a few questions and I'll stop sharing.
Thanks, Dan. We appreciate that. There were a couple of questions while you were speaking. The first is, can you compare the public commitment in Italy to pre-sorting food scraps to here?
Yes, it's Italy, Northern Italy. Let's be fair. Northern Italy is the model for the whole world. So they have the country itself has about 60% participation. It also just they've done the whole circular. It's a little bit different, you have to say, because first of all, you have Novamont there, which is right in the backyard. Most of the utilities are public-private. I don't want to say socialist, but it's easier when you don't have to work with a whole bunch of different haulers, composters. You get everybody on the same page. So, but there's a big breadth from Milan to even San Francisco of diversity.
And then what are the temperature conditions, et cetera, other factors needed for the degradation of the compostable bags?
Okay, well, you got to remember bags are a different polymer. So you can actually get compostable bags that are home compostable, of course, in a municipal composting environment, which is about, over 130, no more than 160 degrees. Any bag will break down like a leaf. I'm a home composter. I home compost my bags at home. Also, as you saw, the biodegradable mulch film, they have soil biodegradability. So that's, of course, when you're talking about bags, you don't want to talk about litter at all. That's not the place for them. However, the polymer itself has what's called a glassy state, which is actually below freezing temperatures. So as long as there's microbes that are moving, they'll eat it.
Great. If you want to take a quick look at the chat, Dan, there was actually some interesting conversation while you were going
Oh, okay.
about some of the challenges folks are facing.
I
There
hope I
are
can,
some curbside programs in Connecticut.
Okay, let's see. Here we go. Okay, yes, actually there are curbside programs in Connecticut. I don't know them all, but I know Darien has some. There's Ridgefield, Newtown. I just saw one in, I don't know if they're drop-offs, but Norwalk, West Hartford, and like I said, I cover all of North America. That's my space. So I'm in Toronto, New York City, and Seattle as much as I'm in Connecticut. So I would say when I talked about forming these advocacy groups, if they wanted to, spread the word, I would think the state, if they could certainly support, like Illinois did, have a food scrap coalition where all these groups can come together. When we have like 3.5 million people in Connecticut, and we have these really good committed folks out in the field. There should be a place on the state level where they can all go and share. So it happens on the street. That's where it starts. Let's see.
Any other questions from participants?
Yeah, the word biodegradability, I just want to mention that. Yes, that's true. And the law for mulch film actually was a labeling law also, which allowed the word biodegradability to be used with biodegradable mulch films. So in generally, it's overused and misused for plastics, oxodegradables. So it's something that we really have to, it's not something that California even took lightly. I was on calls for this and that, and I'm sure other people were as well, because people just don't know, they just don't know. So let's see what else. The BioCycle curbside collection report was for municipal funded programs. They weren't for people who had programs like even here in Connecticut, we said zero curbside for Connecticut. That was for municipally funded programs, not for community composting, which also can have a curbside component. If that makes sense.
From Nate Jones, can revenue be captured with regard to the end product to help create incentives or offset collection costs?
It should be. Your answer is yes, it can be. In Europe, they have EPR plans. The problem is the pitfall to worry about, and if you ever want to have a webinar on EPR, we can bring our Brussels representative in and talk about what's happening in the European Union. But we're so small. We're such a small little group. Food scraps collection is so small. So when EPR is spread, we found even in Europe, the money that we were put into EPR goes to plastics recycling, which is now we're saying, well, gee, even though we're small, we're giving money, but how about taking the money that we do for EPR to go back and put more composting sites to help fund some commercial composting curbside programs. So that's something they're debating now in the EU because it really, I think everyone would be happy if we could have some money to go back into building our infrastructure in Connecticut and getting more composters.
Can your bags be used in co-collection programs, and do you have any experience doing so?
Well, yeah, I've talked way back when I was called from folks in Minnesota to help spec out bags for like the Blue Bag program or something like that. And they're all, like we said, we make the compostable resins, so it really can be put into any form. But yes, with there's a couple of those programs in Norway that have been around for a long time, which have some track records. So if you want case studies on how those work, it's fine. The bags, when they're being separated like that, they have to be a little stronger. They have to withstand being handled. So, but yes, they can.
We are running up against our deadline.
Yeah,
Pam, do you want to wrap up?
Yeah,
No,
Dan, thanks. Dan, thanks so much for presenting to us today. That was really awesome, great information. I think everyone really enjoyed it. It's nice to have you right here in Shelton. Really nice that you're local. So We appreciate your time. And
Well, thank you all.
the videos were great. The videos were great. That was fun too. So thanks to everyone for attending today. Mark your calendar for our next COVID webinar scheduled for Thursday, December 17th at 10 a.m. And stay safe, stay well.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.